Welcome to a Life Burst podcast. I'm Andrew, and today we're gonna be reviewing Changing Diva. And we're gonna be reviewing the blue cards in Changing Diva. As always, we're gonna use our grading scale of staple, playable, barely playable, and not playable. And we're gonna start reviewing these blue cards, see which ones are good and which ones you might want to start using in your decks. We'll start with the level ones like we always do. And we've got Hijet Azure Angel. It's a level 1 with 3,000 power. It has an enter ability of, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put any number of them on the bottom of your deck in any order, and the rest on the top of your deck in any order. This card is also an angel. I guess that's worth mentioning. It's barely playable. So you'll see this card get used off and on in various deck lists, and it's sort of like a stopgap filler. It's not fantastic by any means, but it's okay. And the reason why it's okay is because it doesn't have a life burst, so it kind of fills in the slots with if you need some non-life burst level ones, specifically blue ones. And it kind of does this thing in Magic. The term is scry the top 3 cards of your deck. You can put any number on the top of them and the rest on the bottom. So it kind of sets yourself up for success later down the line. This is not an incredibly useful ability, but it is. 3 is enough that you're sort of setting yourself up for some synergies if your deck is looking for some synergies. And I think the ones that loot are better. Like, for example, we've got this one coming down in a second. That's basically a lootish. Looting meaning that you draw a card and discard a card. I think those ones are probably better. But this will do the trick. It's also an angel. That kind of matters a little bit for tribal synergies. But not a ton. It's not like an angel that's drawing me into it. So again, I'm going to say barely playable because you'll find that you'll use it every now and then to fill out various blue decks, but it's never going to be exciting. Snow Mayu, which I believe the Japanese name was Snowmu, and I like Snowmu better. But Snow Mayu Code Maze is a labyrinth, level 1, 2,000 power. It's got an auto, which is at the end of your turn. If there are 2 or more frozen signies in your opponent's field, you can put one of those frozen signies on the field into the bottom of its owner's deck. And then you can its enter ability is freeze a signy in your opponent's center zone. So this is a little bit of a role player in the sets that are going to be coming out, to a point where there's going to be more and more cards that deal with the center as a sort of a thing that, oh, this is doing something in the center. So sometimes you don't always put the best cards in your center unless you are playing center specific signies that like to be in the center, or center specific synergies. So it's something to keep in mind. This isn't amazing, but it is, I think, personally, an upgrade to Bradamante. Bradamante, at the end of the turn, vanished the Signy and made the opponent discard. And while discard is a pretty good thing to do, especially on a level 1, this doesn't vanish the Signy. It puts it on the bottom, which is the best form of removal, really, in Wixoss. And it doesn't enable itself, but at least it's useful on its own. Bradamante had this thing where every time you played it as just a level 1, it was just a level 1 unless there was a frozen thing. You had to have another card to trigger it. Now this, you have to have another card to trigger it as well, but the floor is a little higher in the fact that it's going to freeze something no matter what. You just should know if you're putting this in your deck, maybe if you have other freeze effects, to avoid freezing the middle center lane, because Snow Mayu might come out of nowhere, and you might want to make sure that you're freezing the center lane with Snow Mayu, or at least leaving it to be frozen. So this gets a playable rating. It's not amazing, but if you were playing freeze synergies, this is a card you'll want to use. The next one is a level 1 blue called Hasi, Phantom Aquatic Beast. Now that's going to be a level 3,000. It's got a life burst, which is if you have 4 or more cards in your hand, then you can vanish target up Signy on your opponent's field. It also has the constant, which is if you have 4 or more cards in your hand, this Signy gets plus 4,000 power. So let's treat this like it is you've got the 4 cards in your hand. It's not incredibly hard to have 4 cards in your hand in blue, or in Wecross in general. So this is going to be, generally speaking, a level 1 blue 7,000 power Signy, which is big. It's a big Signy. for level 1. And the Life Burst, again, you probably have the 4 in your hand, so it's just vanish target up Signy on your opponent's field. Blue has hard times clearing lanes, so this Life Burst is unusual in blue and actually pretty good. However, this is a pretty aggressive level 1. You're not really using this defensively, which is a little bit at odds with what the color does. But if you are playing a more aggressive blue deck, then this could be something that you want to consider. I would say this is probably barely playable because, again, most blue decks aren't aggressive based, but it has a niche, and it's worth mentioning that it has a niche, and you could totally use it if you need to. I actually think like one of the best places to play this is things like No Limit if you were really searching for aggressive level 1 Signies. But, you know, you could think about stuff like that. Moving right along into our level 2s, we've got, I don't know how to pronounce this one, Galiol, Azure, Angel. That's my take at it. It's a level 2 with 8,000 power. It's got an auto ability, which is whenever this attacks, draw a card and discard a card, and then when it enters, you draw a card and discard a card. Its Life Burst is down target Signy on your opponent's field and freeze it, draw a card. So I'm gonna actually put this one, I was very low before testing it, and I saw it in a lot of Japanese decks and thought, oh, this could be something worth mentioning. Because I didn't understand that it was good, and then I played it a lot, and I've upgraded it from barely playable to playable. It is a pretty good card. It's also an angel, for what it's worth. Again, not a pull into angels, but it's worth mentioning that is a thing that's worth mentioning. And the double loot actually pays itself off. I probably want 2 or 3 copies. I don't know if I really want the 4 copies unless I'm also playing this card, because there's a wombo combo between them. But if you're in a deck that's looking for very specific Signy, very powerful Signy pieces, this is something to consider, right? A Fenrir or this type of thing, or like level 3s that have big removal effects. Like, this is pretty good because it will wall, and even though it doesn't give you card advantage, it gives you a lot of card selection to work through. And inevitably, you can even play this later in the game as a thing where you play it just to get the card selection, and then you kill it, and then you pull up whatever you actually were looking for. So I'll give it the playable rating. Blue's actually pretty good in this set. Okay, this is the hard one, right? Hajikata. I think that's how we say it. Hajikata. Azure General. It's a level 2 with 7,000 power with 2 constant abilities that all depend on discard. The first constant ability, as long as you have discarded, and that's you, yourself, not the opponent, 1 or more cards this turn, this Signy gets 3,000 power, so it turns into a 10,000 power. And it has another constant, which is as long as you've discarded 2 or more cards this turn, this Signy gains whenever this Signy vanishes a Signy on your opponent's field through battle, then your opponent discards a card at random. So you want to enable both sides, right? It's not super great as a 10,000. I mean, it's okay as a 10,000, but you want to get the second ability in here, right? This gives you a reason to vanish something rather than enter starve. You're also probably playing it in a Madoka deck, where Madoka will trigger it. And if you're playing in a Madoka deck, you have Senga to give Lancer, and Lancer's a great, like, if you're vanishing the Signy anyways, giving something Lancer on top of it is awesome. And it works with Madoka, Senga, because it's a level 2. So you can see that there's a combo here to basically enable it at will, but you can also enable it at will in your Elrig deck if you're running Chime of the Blessed Key. And if you're in a Madoka deck or a Musica deck, that's something you probably want to play anyways, because it gets stuff into your discard pile. So you can enable this, and I honestly, I've played it without Chime, and it's been underperforming without Chime. And the moment you put Chime in your Elrig deck, it just, like, you can trigger it at all points in times. It becomes something worthwhile. Sometimes you even have 2 of them in play, and it's just like you feel unbeatable afterwards. Moving right along. Oh, right, the staple. This is a staple here. I would consider playing this in non-Madoka decks, although it's harder to make it work because you're losing Elrig deck consistency. But if you if you're looking at grinding resources, this is pretty good in all blue decks. And then as Madoka deck, I just would be playing this constantly. So we got Darudo, Natural Planet. That's a level 2 with 10,000 power. It's vanilla. It doesn't have any text on it. It just says draw 2 cards in your opponent's discard a card. This is passable. I don't think it's amazing. I'd say barely playable because again, we've got like cards like Falcolor, which is that level 2 with no text on it, but has a life burst that says down 2 Signies on your opponent's field, draw a card. I think that's probably better as the defensive blue wall of choice. But and I probably would play He over this. That's Helium. But if you are looking for more blue walls, I guess this could work. In total, I would probably call this one a barely playable. There's just other options that you could be playing in blue. Then we've got Con Aqua Master Trickster. It's I think the first time we've actually seen the Trickster typing on these Signies. I just like that it's just like, hey, you want to sell some water? I'm a con master. I'm selling water. It's a level 3 with 12,000 power. If there's a face-up card in your Signy zones, then draw a card. Right now, this is a fail. It doesn't do anything. It's unplayable. There, I guess, could be futures where we have more face-down cards, but I'm just drawing the card when this enters. If as my reward for doing face-down cards, which is probably a pretty dangerous thing to do, I'm going to say no, and probably no in the future. Moving into the 3 secret rares at our level 3s. Most of these are all pretty good hits. We've got Ambi, Azure Angel Queen. It is a 12,000 powered angel, level 3. At the beginning of your attack phase, if there are 3 or more angels on your field, you get to draw a card. And then also, auto, whenever the Signy attacks, if there are 15 or more angel Signies in your trash, you can pay blue and colorless if you do freeze target Elrig on your opponent's field. It's got a life burst. Add target level 2 angel Signy from your trash to your hand. Put a level 1 angel Signy from your trash onto the field. So, straight off the bat, I'm just going to say this. It's not broken, but it's very strong. The life burst is very strong. Most field ambushes that you can set up are going to be just one thing, right? They're just going to be like, put a Signy on there, and it's like, cool, you're chump blocking. That's great. Being able to chump block and gain some selectivity, and it's always better to be able to pull things out of your graveyard, especially the ones that you like want, than it is to just do this randomly. So or if it just said draw a card, for example. So you have control over this, and being a level 3, it's late enough in the game that their control is probably paying off. You're also probably having a fair amount of stuff in your trash because you are trying to use the second ability. But the life burst is very, very good, is what I'm trying to say. The first auto ability where you're drawing a card is okay. It's not amazing by any stretch, but it's okay. And then the second one, it's hard to get 15 Angel Signy in your trash. It's just hard to get that many things in your trash in general. But freezing an Elrig again is pretty rare of an ability and pretty good. And aside from Card Jockey with Endless Punchline being able to attack while it's still frozen and downed, there's stopping the opponent from being able to do their level 3 attack and get their piece off is pretty strong, I'd say. Overall, this would actually be a draw into Angels, but the problem is also Angels are mostly in red and white, so this is a third color to be getting drawn into it. Again, you need a critical mass of good Angels, especially in the blue coloring, and there are actually a few that are worth mentioning. So I think it's probably, if you're playing an Angel deck at this moment, a good draw. Whether it stays that way is, debatable. You've got Royal Blue, Natural Crystal Brilliance. That one's going to be a level 3 with 10,000 power, but its real power is in its action, which is target frozen Signy on your opponent's field gains auto at the beginning of the attack phase. Vanish this Signy unless you pay colorless till end of turn. It has the life burst ability of freeze target Elrig and target Signy on your opponent's field. It's important to note that that life burst doesn't down it, so you're freezing things, and basically they could choose not to attack with it. But again, that's life saved on your end, so that's still pretty good. Um, Realistically, if you're a freeze deck, this ability is good. It's not overwhelmingly amazing, but if you're a freeze deck, you're also probably enter starving them, so taxing them could theoretically open up lanes. I've been using a lot of this actually as a 3 of in my Uchu deck that I've been testing, and it is very good there, especially if you combo it with other ways to starve the opponent of enter, things like Chandelier, for example. So it becomes really good there. It just becomes passable outside of that. But if you're doing a freeze build, this is a draw into doing a freeze build, which hasn't really existed before. But it's not an overwhelmingly good card. I would rate this. Oh, by the way, this is staple on Angels, or I guess I should say playable on Angels because it's not really in the right color. Royal Blue would be a staple in freeze decks. Then we have ZR, I think it's Zirconium. ZR02, Natural Element Queen. It's a level 3 with 12,000 power. This one has Harmony Black Elrig, and you're going to want that Black Elrig, so basically, unless you're making a Dream Team, this is pretty much only going to go on to Diagram. Has 2 abilities. Auto, whenever the Signy attacks, you may pay colorless. If you do, target Signy on the opponent's field gets negative 3,000 till end of turn. If the opponent has discarded 2 or more cards, that Signy gets 8,000 instead. And then it has the enter ability of pay blue, target, you get to draw a card, or the opponent discards a card at random. So this is a pretty good card. Now, from my understanding, it does eventually get replaced and becomes sort of the 5th and 6th copy of a card called H2O later down the line. But for right now, this is going to be one of the main draws into playing Madoka, and it's very good at Madoka. It is a little awkward, I will say, because by the time you're at that point in Madoka, especially if everything's kind of going right and you're using these, then inevitably you don't always have the ability to make the opponent discard. But I guess if they have an empty hand, that's also a good way to win for you, so it doesn't really matter. And you have the escape clause where you just draw and you try to find like a guard or something with that draw instead. And it's weird, but being a level 3, you'd think attacking and giving negative 3,000 power isn't all that great, but blue needs ways to have lane opening, so it actually is pretty okay there too. So I'm going to say this is a staple. It's playable in decks that aren't Diagram, but it's a staple in Diagram at least until H2O shows up. And then the last one we're going to be talking about is Spinning Harmony. Now, Spinning Harmony is a spell. It costs 1 blue, or I guess I should say a single blue. And its text is freeze, target Signy on your opponent's field, draw a card. Then if there are 3 or more frozen Signy on your opponent's field, the opponent discards a card at random. And it is worth noting this is a spell without a life burst, which is actually right now a benefit. Because trying to put a spells matters deck together with things like Chandelier or these other spells matter cards is difficult when they all have life burst. You run out of slots very quickly. Is Spinning Harmony good? And the answer is Spinning Harmony is passable, right? At no point in time is Spinning Harmony bad. If you have excess of enter, it cycles itself and you can move on to the next thing right away. Getting 3 frozen Signies is actually a pretty big ask. You're going to need to be looking at probably 12 sources of freeze, this including, in order to pull that off. Some of those freezes are probably going to need to be double frozens, and you also are going to want life bursts that freeze. So, like for example, this Angel Galiol is not a freeze thing on its own, but it does have the ability to freeze from its life burst. So in order to pull that off, I'd say with life bursts included, you probably need 18 sources of freeze to get Spinning Harmony to regularly go off. As such, even in the biggest, most freeze-oriented deck, you're probably only playing this as a 2 of because it's just hard to pull that off consistently. You might be able to pull off a 3 freeze once per game. And this rewards you for doing that, but it's not like a constant thing. So it's playable in freeze decks and then unplayable elsewhere. but I wouldn't go nuts with trying to load your deck with that. And that's all the blue cards that are in this set. Let me just click this button just to make sure there's no other ones that I'm forgetting, but I'm almost certain there isn't. No, they're all multicolored, kid. Guys, as always, if you want to learn more about deck techs as well as the metagame and other card reviews, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And as always, may you flip a life burst.